Virgin. Beauty. Bitch. Podcast. Inspiring women to overcome social stereotypes and share unique life experiences without fear of being defiantly different. Your hosts, Christopher and Heather. Let's talk, shall we?
Hey, if a close friend were to say to you, you know what, I love you, but you have a codependency issue, or you have relationship addiction, how would you respond to that? Would you tell them where to go, how long to stay there and never come back? Or would you seek out someone like our guest? She has over 30 years of experience as a codependency expert. Help us welcome marriage and family therapist Darlene Lancer to VIRGIN.BEAUTY.B.
Thank you very much. I've had my own recovery and struggles with codependency. And when I first heard about it, and I was ashamed to think that I was codependent. So that was in the 70s. Codependency Anonymous was formed in the 70s. I got my training wheels in Al-Anon, which was a program for family members of alcoholics, loved ones of alcoholics. And historically, they were called co-alcoholics. And then they found that the symptoms preceded the marriage, to an alcoholic, and started in the family. And little by little, they discovered codependency, that it's its own thing. Some people call it a disease. And when I wrote Codependency for Dummies back in 2011, I actually had an argument with the editor, which was Hazelden, because he thought dependents were something separate from addicts. And I said, no, addicts are codependent too. And he said, they can't be codependent because they're in relationships with codependents. He didn't really understand. And usually codependents gravitate towards other codependents. So some people say to me, oh, my wife, or my husband is so codependent. What should I do? They don't see their own codependency because it can manifest differently with different people. In fact, I'm probably in the minority that thinks narcissists are codependent too. But if you look at the symptoms, and in my most recent book, Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist, I have a whole chapter comparing codependence and narcissists and how the key symptoms are the same, or the traits, I should say, but the behavior, the symptomatic behavior may be the opposite. So for instance, codependents have dysfunctional boundaries. Well, they don't have boundaries around themselves. They can't say no to people. They focus on someone else. They don't really see themselves. Their life revolves around other people. That's part of my definition, is your thinking and behavior revolve around someone else or some other thing, which would include a substance, a process like sex addiction or gambling. So the narcissist, on the other hand, they don't see other people. Everyone is a projection of themselves. So they both have dysfunctional boundaries, but they manifest different. Similarly, dysfunctional communication. So narcissists will push people away with their aggression, and that's how they feel safe. And codependents want to pull people in, and that's how they feel safe. So they avoid confrontation. They're passive. They can't say no. As I said, they go along to get along. The narcissist wants to get ahead. They want to put themselves first. But it works well with a codependent because they put other people first. So for a while, the attraction works until finally, could take 20 years, some of my clients, they realize their needs aren't getting met. They keep trying harder. That's what they're trained to do. Give more, try more, please more, and then I'll get the love, because then I'll feel lovable. Well, underneath is shame. It applies to both. The narcissist doesn't feel lovable. They want to take, and get admired by other people and be given to and sacrificed for, and that makes them compensates for their shame inside. They both have dysfunctional self-esteem. One is inflated and one is devalued themselves. So there's like opposites, but the problem is similar in both.
So, Darlene, like, where does this all start? I mean, we've identified how these two tracks, codependency and narcissism kind of merge into relationships. But where does this begin for the individual? How do we get into these identities?
Codependency is learned behavior. It starts in childhood. So it's generational. So if you had codependent or addicted parents, something like that, your parenting and yourself is going to be shaped by that. And then your behavior, your attitudes transfer to your child. So if you have low self-esteem for whatever reason from your parents, then your low self-esteem gets transmitted in your behavior. Low self-esteem becomes evident in the way you communicate. If you go to a job interview, you reveal your self-esteem by the way you talk. Do you answer questions? Are you evasive? Are you direct? Do you make eye contact? Do you speak with confidence? Or are you diffident or reserved or trying to please and being evasive, things like that? So the parent will be that way. They won't have good boundaries. And then it all gets transferred down. And a lot of parents have children, this is maybe more from the mother's point of view, to boost their own self-esteem. Someone will need me. They want to live through their children. You become famous, then I'll feel that I did a good job. Their parenting becomes their reason for living. And it's about taking care of someone else and living through someone else. I had one client who said, well, she felt better when she had a child to focus on. Without that, she felt lost and depressed because underneath is emptiness. This goes for a narcissist too. If they're not, and then control is a common symptom for both. So it looks a little different. A narcissist might give orders and tell you what to do and how to dress. And a codependent may be giving you advice and wanting to help you and manage you and control that way and control their own feelings. So a parent might feel, this particular person felt more valued, more valuable if they had a child to take care of. And without that, they felt lost. So a lot of times when a codependent leaves a relationship, they just feel lost. And by the way, that's one of the reasons they feel more alive with someone who is very melodramatic, someone who has a lot of drama, someone with a personality disorder, a narcissist, a borderline, a histrionic personality, or just a lot of conflict, an addict, a lot of turmoil and conflict in the relationship. And then they have something to figure out and work out and work on. They want to work on the relationship all the time. If a relationship is good, it works. You don't have to keep fixing it. You have to communicate. You have to resolve needs and conflicting, opinions and things, but you're able to work that out. So how do you get into it? So I start to say, if the mother is preoccupied with her own depression or problems or marital conflict, things like that, she can't really attune to the child. If you can't connect with yourself, it's hard to connect with other people. So codependents aren't really connected to themselves. They don't know words usually how to describe their feelings. A parent needs to teach that to a child. Oh, you're sad. And then you mirror the child's feelings. So a lot of codependents are raised in families where it's not okay to be sad or be quote unquote negative, to have negative feelings or to be angry. So that's shaming. So codependency and shame I say they co-emerge, and it's codependents have shame and shame is the cause. So I don't know where it begins or ends, but it derives from the parenting and the way you're treated. Every person, I wrote a book, Conquering Shame and Codependency, because it's the core issue. Every child needs to feel that both parents want a relationship with them, that are interested in them for who they are, not because they get good grades, they're beautiful, or thin, they're athletic, and that they make time and they're listening. They're attuning to you. They're paying attention. It's not enough to give you money and buy things or say, I love you, but not listen to you or invalidate your feelings or your interests or your needs. So that causes shame. It's shame.
What would be your recommendations to our listeners that are hearing, that perhaps with one or both parents that, that those needs were not met and, that the parent either used gifts or money or just outright didn't pay attention to who they were as an individual? Like what do you feel are some of the stepping stones to cultivating that self-value and like recognizing your own codependency that stems out of that?
That is a very important, crucial question. And for instance, a lot of programs and even therapists don't talk about shame. So it's one of the worst feelings. You feel like you're an alien, like you don't belong. You're unlovable at the bottom of that. You might think, well, I'm not smart enough. I don't make enough money. I don't have a good enough figure. But if you dive down deeper, it's basically, the client kind of said this to me recently. She realizes as she walks into a room, she has a feeling that people aren't going to like her. She goes to a party, she's in a class, that there's this feeling that I'm just not likable or lovable if people really get to know me. So you can't change the past, but you can't go back, but you can get reparented in therapy, but ultimately you have to reparent yourself. So the first thing I always say is you have to come out of denial, and you can't change things that are unconscious if you don't know about it. So start writing down all your negative self-talk. The first ebook that I wrote was 10 Steps to Self-Esteem. And now it's also a webinar, How to Raise Your Self-Esteem. And that's the first step. So every day, and include the shoulds, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have been talking about myself. I shouldn't spend so much time on the phone, but you can't get off with people, or you're embarrassed talking about yourself, or I didn't do that well enough. That was stupid. Why did I make that mistake? All this negative self-talk. And you're shaming yourself. So your parents could be dead, but you're continuing the legacy every day. And it's depressing. And you talk yourself out of things. Oh, I would like to go back to school and get this degree, but you think it's too late. It costs too much. I haven't studied in a long time. I won't do well, and whatever. You just talk yourself out of your dreams and things you want to do. And that's part of that. Not encouraging yourself, not supporting yourself. And I would say, go to Codependence Anonymous, get a therapist, get a sponsor in the meeting, do the exercises in my books. These are things that can change. Self-esteem is learned, codependency is learned, and you can learn healthy self-esteem. You can raise your self-esteem by, challenging yourself, learning more skills, how you talk to yourself. Then the next step, and by the way, these problems all arise out of denial, which is another symptom. Denial of needs, denial of feelings, denial of wants. You're focused on what your partner wants, what your child wants. You don't think about your own needs. You become needless. The narcissist thinks only of their needs. They're too entitled, and the codependent feels unentitled. They need to be more narcissistic. So, but it's easier for a codependent to change. Narcissism is a personality disorder, and there's genetic component too, not just behavioral. So codependents can change, and ask yourself, this is a really hard question for codependents. I'm feeling glum right now, or I'm feeling down or lethargic. What do I need? And it may take a while to figure that out. Do I need to talk to someone? Do I need to rest? Do I need inspiration? Do I need to eat something? Do I need to set a boundary with someone? Do I need to ask for help or ask for something? A lot of codependents don't want to ask for help. They're used to having to take care of their own selves because of their parents not attuning to their needs or their feelings. So asking yourself those questions. Codependency for Dummies takes you through. It's organized like a healing program to get familiar with yourself, to raise your self-esteem. And then the hardest thing, I think, is learning to love yourself. Self-esteem is how you think about yourself. Loving yourself is more of a feeling. And for a lot of people, it feels incomprehensible. I know what it's like to love another person, and I don't know what it's like to love myself. And what is love? You have to know the person. You have to get to know yourself. You have to listen. When you think of what you do to the person you love, you listen to them, you empathize with them, you offer help, you give care, you try to understand them. Well, apply that all to yourself with tenderness. So most codependents didn't get a lot of nurturing. They may have had a parent that didn't know how to nurture. So learning how to nurture yourself, I mean, it's more than bubble baths. It's really paying attention to your wants and needs and things like that. So typically a codependent, if they say, well, I'm going to go to the gym today, for instance, I'm going to take care of my body. And then someone calls and they say, oh, I really need to talk about this problem. And then there's no more, they just, oh, this person needs me, I'm not going to go to the gym. So they don't keep appointments, commitments with themselves.
It's interesting that a lot of these conditions, of course, as you mentioned, begin in our youth when we don't know anything about ourselves. We're learning about the world around us. How do you get to a point where you can identify this condition that you've been obviously brought up and nurtured into? Like, you may even think this is normal behavior. Yes, you have relationships that fail, and you may have gotten into a pattern. But how do you see it?
You're right. And there's something in particular that I have realized just in the last few years is that, and it pertains to this, generally, not all codependents, but I would say the majority of them have never felt safe. In their family, they didn't feel safe. Maybe the parents argued a lot. Maybe there was addiction. Maybe they had an angry or neglectful parent. So they don't really know what it's like to feel safe. So they date people and someone is exciting to them. They don't realize that that's things, they may have anxiety. In fact, they go out with someone with a secure, we talk about attachment style, and who's calm, a reliable person. They think, oh, they're boring. So they crave that excitement. It's also to feel alive because of all of the emptiness inside. They crave melodrama and excitement and making up and breaking up and fighting and then all of that. Or does he love me? Does she love me? That. And then they have sex and then it's great and it's high and low. They end up committing to that person in the romance stage. They get to know them and then they find out, oh, they're not anything like they were in the beginning. And then they try to change them back into their ideal of who it was. So they don't really know what it's like to be safe in a stable relationship, what we call the secure attachment. They're used to an insecure attachment, maybe a mother that's sometimes loving and sometimes is dismissive or scolding, or sometimes is there and sometimes is, demeaning you, or same with the father. So they become hypervigilant, and when they're dating then or getting into a relationship, they confuse anxiety and excitement. They think it's chemistry. They don't realize, they think, oh, it's the butterflies. They don't realize, I don't feel safe with this person. I don't know if he's going to call me again. I don't know if we're really in a relationship, or we just dating, or we committed, and that just goes on and on. And even after they're married, is he really there for me? Is he making time for me or her? It goes with men too. So you don't know, but gradually as you recover, your friends will change. When you start to get more connected to yourself, you then pay attention to how you feel. Oh, this person was dismissive. This person ignored my boundary. You notice those things, which you wouldn't notice in the beginning because you're so motivated to please and be liked and be loved. And so you just go along. But when you have a little more recovery, you say, well, wait a minute, this person just ignored me. I said, I don't like that. And then they just went ahead and did it anyway. That's not safe. That's disrespectful. Or they're only talking about themselves. So in the beginning, you would just be a good listener and think, he or she's like wonderful. You just idealize them. But then when you start to have more self-worth, you think, or are they even getting to know me? Do they think my needs are important? I always have to adjust to their timetable. Things revolve around them. So as you build yourself, you give yourself more worth. You have more value to yourself. And people will treat you the way you teach them. You teach
That
people
is
how to treat you.
honestly very, very helpful and so well articulated. And I think touching back on what you had mentioned before on writing down these shoulds or the things I can't do or didn't get done, or I don't know, the perpetual. Sometimes it isn't things that your parents have necessarily said, but that a concept of your worth has been embedded in your mind. So the shoulds continue on. What have you found to be helpful with your clients to write down those pieces of self-talk and try to transition like that thinking? Like I know that people talk a lot about affirmations, so trying to get to the core root of why you feel these things that you're kind of negatively saying in your mind, and try to address that wound and understand it, and either through different mechanisms like paint a different picture about yourself and then replace them, if and when genuine, to bring in an affirmation that helps to heal that wound. But I'd be so interested to hear like what you found to be helpful as transitioning from that list of what you are not doing or not capable of, or the negative self-talk, into like a different narrative in your mind.
Good question. Well, that's why there's 10 steps. It's 10 steps of self-esteem. And in my book, Conquering Shame, like 1/3 of the book are self-help exercises. So the first step is, hearing that voice. And then you have to identify it as a critic. And it's true, a lot of times parents didn't say those things, but you inferred that if you were perfect or you achieved or you behaved in some certain way, then you'd get praise. So it's maybe how you survive. Maybe if I don't get angry, or if I get A's or whatever, then I see my brother or sister is getting it, then I'll get the attention. So it could be an inference. And then you tell yourself that to be safe or to get love. So identifying that voice, and then sometimes it's so prevalent that it's taken over a person's whole personality. So what you want to do is start to become a witness of it. Oh, it's just that voice in my head. And you might give it a name. So people come up with very creative names. Or maybe it reminds you of a parent or a sibling. Oh, so that's my mother talking, or my father, or my sister, or critic, or whatever. And then other steps include dialoguing with it. So there's the aware part of you, and with your non-dominant hand, your left hand usually, you can dialogue to find out what was the purpose of that. Well, it might be, like I said, to keep you safe. Or for instance, before you're going on a first date with someone, you might shame yourself. Oh, you can't fit into your, your nice dress, and you're too fat, and look at your, your hair looks terrible, whatever. So the purpose might be not just to shame you, but to try to encourage you to look better, to be loved, to get the prize, to get the guy or the girl on the date. But then you realize, is that helping? No, it makes you insecure. So when you go out, you're probably going to behave in a way that's going to, not just your looks, but your behavior will maybe ruin the date because you're insecure. Because now you've lowered your self-esteem, and you made yourself more anxious. So you look at the motives, and you can, and I have a lot of interview questions, which you can like webinar in my book, to find out like what, and this, you say, is this working? And then another aspect of it is getting a connection, in connecting with part of you that hears that voice, the inner child, who is now being shamed and now wants to go run and hide in the corner, doesn't even want to go out, is afraid to meet people, is afraid to date, things like that. So is afraid to open up or reveal, which could make you more attractive to people. Here's another example. You're afraid to be spontaneous because you're always editing what you say or do. Well, people who are spontaneous are usually more attractive to other people. That's someone who's watching every word that they say because of caution, because they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to be disliked or rejected. So you get to the motives, and you get in touch with the part of you that is listening to all this and how painful it is. And then later steps is like, then you become from a critic to a coach. And I cite coach, I can't think of his name, from SC. He was famous, and he devoted himself to coaching in a way that was going to be supportive, because most football coaches were always degrading and abusing the players. And he just made up his mind he's not going to do that. And he won season over season. Person fumbled the ball or something, he said, well, go back in there and, learn from your mistake. Next time you won't do that.
I want to ask this question too. How much of the codependency is pivoted on gender? Obviously, historically, the way that gender has put men and women in places of expectations, codependency seems to be, just part of that. Is there a relationship to gender and codependency, narcissism as well?
Well, it's interesting because another aspect of your question is that, or an earlier question, is that the idea of codependency is very cultural. So I have clients whose parents were from Latin America, from the Middle East, from Asia, and those are collectivist cultures. And the family is more important, and the family's reputation, in particular, is more important than the individual. So they come over here, and then the children are exposed to the American way of life and values, and they're trying to break away from their family and be independent, maybe marry outside of their ethnicity or religion, have their own, spend more time with their friends than with their family. And the family they all pull together and like shame and try to control the Native American to follow the cultural values that the parents have. They say, like, you should do all this for the family. You're a bad son. You're a bad daughter. You're not putting your family first. So it causes a lot of conflict. But in those other cultures, they'd be well adjusted. So what we call codependent is a cultural point of view. It's a Occidental Western idea.
That's interesting because, as I think about this, it seems like codependency in some cultures is welcomed in the strength of that culture, whereas codependency in our culture, for instance, seems to be a detriment to weakness.
Right. Well, you can say that about a lot. a lot of different things, cultural.
We love to ask our guests, and I appreciate your responses around codependency and, gender foundations and also different cultural foundations. Um, I'm wondering, for the purposes of our show, we like to ask our guests, what does feminine mean to you?
It's interesting. Well, I think, of course, I'm a product of my culture too. And so I think the general definition, and I'm influenced by that too, stems from biology. And so I think of feminine as being soft, nurturing, empathetic. You think of mothering, but also creative, intuitive. And the masculine is more assertive and goal-oriented. Oh, by the way, we need both aspects.
So share some of your work with us, your books, the programs that you run, so people know if they want to connect with you, work with you directly, where to go and what they need to do. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Okay. Well, I coach internationally, and my website, whatiscodependency.com, has all the information on my services page. And then I have a page for resources where all my books, and there's some free meditations on there. And there's also webinars and a self-love meditation that people can listen to. And if you forget that, usually look up my name, DarleneLancer.com. And I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. So I have a lot of information freely available to the public. And if anyone wants to get a list of tips on self-love, they can email me at info@DarleneLancer.com. And my ebooks and paperbacks are available on online stores like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and the paperbacks are available in stores.
It feels like, we've just dipped our toes into a pool of the human condition. And it's very difficult to actually pull this all apart because every individual probably experiences it a little differently and interprets it a little bit differently. So I would definitely recommend someone, if they're interested in learning more and healing from this, to get your books and reach out to you directly if that's their calling as well. We can't thank you enough for taking the time to share your experience and expertise with us, because this is a very, very complex situation that a lot of people find themselves into, and just recognizing it is hard enough, let alone healing from it. So we can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us and sharing your expertise with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Excited to check out your website to dive in more. So thanks for joining us.